watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. the live stream. Detroit is different and Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit. All right. Welcome back to Public Comment. I am Kari Frazier of Detroit is Different, and this is a show where we talk about municipal politics of the city of Detroit every week, really based on one thing. One thing that is delivered through my co-host of this, Malachi Barrett of Bridge Detroit. He delivers a notebook that covers a whole lot of municipal politics, because municipal politics, if you're not paying attention, really has so much impact on all politics. Malachi, how you feeling today?
Good morning. I'm feeling good. We got a new mayoral candidate in the race last night. Santil Jenkins is officially in now. So two candidates, Mary Sheffield and Santil, have both had big kind of kickoff parties.
Mm-hmm.
There's a third candidate who says he's in. That's Joel Hashim, and some others that are waiting in the wings. So a little bit of movement on that race, but we've got some other stuff to talk about today. City council business.
Definitely. And there will be a new show. If you all have seen the announcement in Bridge Detroit, Detroit Next will cover a lot about the municipal elections, the Detroit elections coming up. There was a show shot here in Detroit is Different studio, as it's another partnership between Detroit is Different and Bridge Detroit. And it's going to give a different type of take, because you'll have some more support from Stephen Henderson. You all know Stephen Henderson. A lot of people are like, okay, what's going on since DET with Stephen? You're going to get that. Also, Bryce Huffman. If you've been following a lot of Bridge Detroit, you should know Bryce as well. And definitely Malachi and myself. And guess what? We're still doing Public Comment because they're different strands, even though they seem closely related. This is a whole different hookup. That's going to be like a feel, I would say, more in a face of journalism. That's kind of how I see Detroit Next, but still on the pulse of being so much of where things are coming from different perspectives of journalists looking at this local election. I'm still going to add my community flavor to it, but Malachi, give them a little bit about Detroit Next.
Yeah, so we started this. Stephen Henderson and I were kind of looking around and realizing that there's not a lot of platforms that are specifically going to talk about the 2025 mayoral election and the city council races. I mean, obviously, newspapers in town, all of our media organizations are going to be covering these races, but we wanted to do something a little bit differently where we could be in conversation with folks, kind of similar to, what Kari and I do here, having this be kind of a more free-flowing conversation about the reporting that we're bringing, as well as what we're hearing from residents. And we're trying to bring candidates on. We're trying to bring on community voices. So if you have a perspective you'd like to share, reach out, let us know. We'll have you on. I mean, we got an entire year of this stuff, so
yes,
there's a lot to dig into. I think that's what's a good opportunity starting this in January too, is that there's a lot to cover here and a lot to kind of break down and explain when it comes to like why you should care, why people should care about these races. And that's ultimately the goal, is to get more people interested and involved in local politics in the city.
Yep. And you can kind of think of it from a tag. It's like Meet the Press meets the barbershop. So it'll be some community strands of like on the street reporting. A lot of different topics will be discovered and explored. That's why you're going to definitely get some candidate stuff here, but it's going to feel a little bit different. I think it's going to be a lot more specific to a lot of the issues, where you're going to get more of the personalities. You're going to get more of the street perspective and others' perspective in Detroit Next, whereas Public Comment's going to really get into different things. And when we talk about getting into different things, oh man, we open up talking about something that was near the end of last year. Okay, what's going to happen with this? How will it move? And I have a lot of opinions on this, and that is the Solar Detroit project. As we see Mayor Duggan moving forward with this initiative that has moved forward, and with it moving forward, it's been a rallying cry from the executive branch about how this has happened and the success of it. We look at it, Detroit is advancing its clean energy initiative by adding even 2 more neighborhoods to its solar project. The city council approved contracts with DTE and Lightstar Renewables 4 solar farms spanning 61 acres of mostly vacant land. The second phase follows the initial rollout in 3 neighborhoods. Despite progress, residents express concerns about what generated solar energy will exclusively serve municipal structures. Residents to face ongoing energy affordability and efficiency challenges. City Council approves phase 2. And with City Council approving the one lone vote that has definitely stood and had more questions about this whole project, Angela Whitfield Callaway, District 2, that is my City Council rep currently, transitioning in 5 with the redistricting and everything. But that is part of this. And just what was the discussion like about this yesterday at City Council chambers? But that'll be 2 days for as you guys are watching this. What was that like, Malachi?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the wheels are on the train. The train is on the track. The horse hooves have hit the dirt. The solar project is moving ahead. Obviously, this is the second phase. So 2 more neighborhoods were added. There's 5 total. The first 3 neighborhoods were approved last year. I think like late summer in the fall. So yeah, this is not surprising that it passed, that the city council authorized these contracts with the same. I mean, DTE and Lightstar were involved in the first phase as well, installing these solar arrays. Not surprising that the council authorized what's called a resolution of necessity, which basically outlines the legal argument that the city needs to establish to acquire property and invoke eminent domain and make offers to property owners to buy their land, to assemble, all of the land that's needed to build these solar farms. There were concerns and questions about how that process has been going, the process of the city collecting that land. And they're doing it through land swaps. Well, I'll have a story in the next couple of days about a land swap that was approved with Perfecting Church and the Arab American Chaldean Council, I believe, to compile some land for solar farms. The city's also been buying out homeowners, offering fair market value or $90,000, whatever's higher. So they're getting at least $90,000 for, and that's if your principal residence is in that area. So if you have multiple properties, if you're not living at that property, they'll offer a little bit less. And that's what happened with one property owner in particular, who feels that he's been given a lowball offer from the city. He missed a legal deadline that was needed to basically try to appeal and get a judge involved in whether that was a fair deal or not. So it looks like that's going to move ahead. But Conrad Mallett talked about how, in the vast majority of cases, people have been accepting the offers that the city has been making. 2 people have retained attorneys to sue to prevent their house from being purchased by the city and then condemned and torn down. I mean, these properties are all being torn down so they can be replaced by solar fields. And I guess the last thing I should say about that too is the vast majority of this appears to be vacant land and abandoned homes. The city did a study that found 97% of the land is either vacant or blighted. So I don't know which is which, but altogether, most of that land is not being used, and that's a major part of the benefit that Mayor Duggan has talked about. In addition to creating green energy for the city's municipal buildings, offset some of the costs of powering those buildings with clean energy. It's also going to put a lot of land to good use. So that has been the more interesting aspect for me to watch. How is that land compiled? What is the long-term impact going to be on these neighborhoods that people are living in and they want to see revitalization? I was in State Fair neighborhood last week talking to some folks, and they want to see that neighborhood come back, but they're skeptical that a project like this will do that. There are some home improvement upgrades that homeowners around the solar farms can get, energy efficiency upgrades, which Lord knows a lot of people need in cold weather. It's like in the teens today. My house is pretty leaky. So,
oh man, and as you offer that, and this is what definitely becomes such a heavy discussion in the city of Detroit. The capacity of what can be done, right? Coupled with the reality of what's happening and coupled with what people are experiencing. So let me make that make a little bit more sense to you. The capacity of what can be done. There is just a known fact. The mass of Detroit is really built, and it's a footprint for 2 million residents to exist and live here. There are not 2 million residents here. Even if people aren't, signing off the census, let me be ambitious and say there are 750,000 people inside the city of Detroit. Let be more ambitious, 800,000, right? So what happens with the vacancy of land? This has been one of the biggest discussions as the sustainability officer for the city of Detroit that leads that department, Tepfira Reston. I sat and did an interview on Detroit is Different about this, because my stance about this has always been, this is very apartheid-like. Now, I'm from the community lens and transparency. I work with Soulardarity as well. Soulardarity is the energy democracy organization for Highland Park in Detroit. And the apartheid state of this is similar to having a diamond mine in your community and not profiting from the diamonds, to live next door to a solar farm and not receive any energy from that solar farm, especially when we know the inefficiency of what's been delivered from DTE Energy as a qualified monopoly that is needed, as I don't have a choice in where I get my energy from. And also the cost of DTE are so high, substantially high, and they're going to be involved in this project. It's my tax dollars is paying for this. That's the framework we need to look at this as. We're paying taxes to build a solar farm, and that solar farm is not going to provide any solar energy for Detroit residents. But that solar farm is going to help municipal structures. In the discussion, the thought process was, as I was definitely going there, because, Michigan Central's a municipal structure. Little Caesars Arena is a municipal structure. And when I say that, meaning part of Detroit money is going into these projects, the Hudson site, all of these concepts. And Tepfira definitely uplifted that, no, the money will not go to actually, or the solar power will not give power to those structures. It'll be more for rec centers and police departments and fire departments and those types of structures. And the thought process is the seed in the ground of this existing already gives a seed to exploit what could happen moving forward. But it's just tragic to think that tax dollars are going to be built to build something that could be so functional, not just for Detroit residents now, but just for the future in renewable energy. If our city buildings want solar power, why don't you just offer that to residents? And one of the key reasons residents have so many challenges getting solar power right now is all of the laws and the blocking that has been done in a lot of legislative against providing solar power to individuals and homes because of that same agreed upon monopoly here. And that's DTE Energy. And DTE Energy is going to receive the contract to execute this too. So it's more tax dollars. It's like I'm already paying a high bill to DTE. Now they're going to get our tax money to build these solar farms, and we're not going to get any of that any of the solar power for that. And who's to say what they're going to do with the solar power? Where's the audit going to come? Now, I'm definitely asking a whole lot of community-based questions that you could definitely hear at probably a lot of community events, but these are questions as residents have really checked out in a lot of this process to what's happening in municipal government when you look at the elections and why people have such low voter turnout, because it looks as if no one's truly advocating for us. This is something simply where you can say, okay, everybody within, I don't know, a 10-mile radius of these or something, they get benefits and credits of this solar power, especially if DTE is involved in the project. Why is that not a part of this? Like, why is that not a part of this? Like, I don't see how that's not a part of this. And I'm sure I would hear a legal debate about, well, that needs to happen in the state house, because that was what Tepfira was saying. Well, I support this, but it's the Republicans in the state house. And we got the next story talking a little bit about that too. And we would do it, but it's the Republicans. It's the Republicans. The thought process is it's a lot of Detroiters, which, local voting is nonpartisan. I don't know what they are, but I know this much. It's going to be solar farms throughout the city of Detroit where people will live within walking distance from them and not receive one credit and one iota of any of that solar power that is more renewable. And DTE is receiving the bulk of this contract. And this will use tax money from Detroiters for it to happen. And I think that that's tragic. And then when you look at the flip side of it, when in reading your article, corporate counsel Conrad Mallett spoke to that the sale of many of these properties are moving remarkably. Though it was uplifted that most of the people that have actually went through with these purchases do not have legal counsel, which gives another magnifying glass to the extreme levels of poverty that exist throughout the city of Detroit. And to afford an attorney and representation for this, especially when it comes to real estate law, hence all of the fights for what happened to right for counsel for renters facing eviction, wouldn't that same concept of that same right to counsel exist for a city conducting business for projects like this? So it's not eminent domain, but in a lot of ways, you're exploiting people in a market where one of the biggest discussions, not just in Detroit, but Michigan and America, is affordable housing. So offering fair market value in places where you've already said, okay, most of this stuff is blighted, most of this stuff is dilapidated, most of this is vacant in the first place. I mean, even if you offer quote unquote fair market value that's based upon the appraisals of the other properties around, I don't know if the people that got fair market value will be able to find a place that's comparable and even affordable. So they don't necessarily know the condition they're in because they're in a position where they can be exploited just due to poverty, like extreme duress. Like, I don't know, what's that called? Like when you sign a contract and what's that term when you sign a contract out of, I think that is duress.
Yeah.
You know?
Extreme duress. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Do you know anybody that's got solar panels on their house?
I do. And the amount of money in the process of getting solar panels, because a lot of this deals with DTE. So even with the solar panel, you're still going to have to, it's you, Lord knows. Okay. This is how the solar panel works. You get a solar panel. All right. It's going to charge up. As it charges up, it's going to transition over time where you move to like basically like 100% of your energy cost will be produced from your solar panel. And even if you have a person with one solar panel on your block, it'll have an impact on everybody else's energy costs throughout your block because that can lower different things. But all of this is charted and you still have a relationship with DTE because of the safety standards set up by set up through the state. So these same energy standards and just getting that energy democracy. So the concept of energy democracy is we should be able to power ourselves however we want to power ourselves. Even a lot of people in Ann Arbor have had so many struggles because of what they face with consumers' energy and just feeling as though that these are not efficient products. So the affordability is an issue and the efficiency of it. So yes, I do know some people with it. It is such an arduous task. It costs a whole lot of money. You definitely have to, first off, ready your household with everything needs to be upgraded. So a lot of homes in Detroit, the first step would be making sure your roof structure is solid enough to carry the weight of a solar panel. Then you have to make sure that the electrical lining is set up for what the solar panels can handle now. So you're going to need more than likely, you're going to need some roof repairs. You're going to need to do some repairs to the wiring throughout your home to prepare for that. Then you're going to have to set up your agreements with DTE Energy so that that can work with them, which that usually is a big problem as well. So solar can be a process where you're easily looking at, I don't know, $15,000 to $25,000. Now, Solidarity's worked with some different partners where they've provided financing depending upon who that is and where that works, but it is still very, very arduous of a task because DTE and the lobbying against this is strong against people obviously getting solar power because, you know, that impacts their business.
I think it had something to do with you're not able to sell power back to the grid. So any additional power that you generate in other states, you can sell that back to the energy provider and get either a credit or, you know, actual cash to help offset the cost of putting all that together. And it's been a while since I've looked at the state law in Michigan, so I could be slightly wrong about this. But I remember I looked this up a couple of years ago because our neighbor, my parents' neighbor in Battle Creek, has some solar panels. They retrofitted their whole house. It was like a multi-year thing, like you're saying. They had to get roof repairs. They had to get their whole house rewired. Couldn't tell you how much it cost. It was expensive. And part of the reason that my parents were looking at this and were like, well, why the hell would you do that? I mean, it's not, is because you're not able to actually provide, you're not able to sell that power back to the grid. You're not able to capitalize on the extra production of the energy. And that was a state law change that was done in, I think, like 2012. It was during the Snyder administration. And yeah, you would assume that DTE lobbying had a major part of that. I mean, it's come up in the conversation before, the idea that people can't have home solar, just the financing doesn't make sense because of some of these regulatory rules that were changed in the legislature. But I don't know. I don't know that anybody's actually really gone out and interviewed people that have been selling their homes or moving out of these neighborhoods. The city's paying for relocation assistance. If it's your principal residence, they'll pay actually double the market value, or 90,000. So 90,000 minimum.
I mean, that's
like, how does that actually, like you're saying? I mean, if I'm just getting the $90,000 minimum, that's not enough to buy another house in the city, let alone, I mean, especially one that's like move-in ready.
Yeah.
So where are these folks going to end up? The city has done something similar with like the Bridging Neighborhoods program over by where, they're rebuilding the Ambassador Bridge. And they said that they've found success in relocating people within the city. But I don't know. I mean, I think that's
and that's where, like, I'm sure a lot of these people that are owners are moving to being renters. And this is just a natural response, I would assume, like in experience in the poverty. It's like you get 90,000, okay, I don't mind moving into this affordable home. I get a 2-bedroom for $1,700 a month. That's cool. That'll probably run out and flatten in about 2.5 years. And now these people, you displaced. We don't have solar power, which leads to story number 2. Story number 2 is from the State House lens. Stephanie Young stomping in ground. So the State House has been a big rodeo. The big rodeo that I'm speaking of is last session that ended was something that the Michigan Dems really have been very upset about because so much legislation did not move forward. A lot of people looking at the leadership of Joe Tate from the Michigan Dems saying that as, Speaker of the House, what could be done was not executed and not enough being done executed. So there are a couple things that impact Detroit directly that I spoke to in the article today about the museums, but more so than the museums, I'm going to bring up the fact that like just a lot of confidence has been lost in what was happening with leadership under Joe Tate, which still speaks to a lot of the leadership in the State House and even knowing a lot of the people that work in the State House and their concepts. These 9 bills that have been approved are now held hostage. And it's like, will Republican State House, keep this in limbo? Will it move forward? It leaves Stephanie Young, that now leads the Detroit chapter. Well, the Detroit caucus in the State House, saying like Karen is even like, the leadership was not there. So it's definitely, I'm sure, a lot of differences and some strong back and forth between Joe Tate and the rest of the Dems in the Michigan State House. What's your take on this? City council's observing this because so much of the state supports the city as Detroit is chartered through the state of Michigan.
Yeah, I don't really get into the legislative coverage that much in Lansing because that's a whole beast, even though it is important. It has a lot of important implications for Detroiters, and Detroit actually featured pretty heavily in this lame duck battle between, that really featured the kind of 3-pointed star. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. Basically, Joe Tate from Detroit was the House Speaker. It was his job to hold votes on bills and get things to the Senate. Karen Whitsett was is a Democratic lawmaker, also from Detroit, whose disagreements with the bills that Tate was sending caused her to abstain from voting and kind of side with Matt Hall and the Republicans who left, who didn't show up to vote. And because the Democratic majority was so slim, that was enough to really stall and kind of blow up a lot of the plans there. And there's been a lot of finger pointing and blame signing since then. Was it Karen Witt's fault for not showing up? Was it Joe Tate's fault for not, being an effective leader? Was it Matt Hall's fault for being, I don't know, I guess playing the game correctly to his interests and winning? And now he's the House Speaker, and Republicans have, control of the House. Was it Governor Whitmer's fault? Like, whose fault was it? Everybody's pointing fingers.
It is the Spider-Man meme, if you guys have seen it. And Neruda just really bringing this story up is the high voter apathy. Because it's things like this that lead people to say, I'm checking out, along with the story earlier about the solar power. So it's who's advocating for people when it's already tough to get people to kind of agree on the same page. And I don't necessarily have an answer for this, but these are the things that definitely one of the episodes of Detroit Next, and I'm sure, I don't know how or where, Detroit is Different is going to do some type of forum on voter apathy, because when people ask why people aren't voting and why people have checked out, this really needs to be explored. And it's stuff like this. And I'm not necessarily saying that I have an answer per se. I do think that since the beginning of time, the political discourse, like in the nation, even under the guise of, like I say, America's designed for white men with businesses and property, that whole talk of how the Constitution was written, it said it was like fist fights going on during that time, and I kind of think that even walking away from the quote unquote writing of the Constitution, some people in the South were already feeling like, hey, the minute we get an opportunity, we're going to take at this. With that being said, the disagreements and differences and passionate discourse, I believe, is healthy because it provides a different lens for everyone. Under that, moving things forward and knowing the capacity of how things can move forward is going to be very key as people are observing and looking to engage in this and really looking to actualize a victory, especially in Detroit, when we tie this to, I'm going to bring up once again, so many people in survival mode of how they're seeing poverty. So they need to actualize outcomes very fast. With those actualized fast outcomes, things need to be happening fast. It doesn't need to be, well, if we move this forward and it's not a Republican and, these people all vote for it and this is in the bill, then this will happen. And then 7 years from now, something's going to happen. Even though I know politics moves slow, politics is going to have to move a lot more fast if you want more people to buy into it. If not, it's going to be a lot of people checking out more and more and more, I believe. So
let me talk about some of these bills really quick. So basically, it's Matt Hall's new House Speaker's responsibility to send these to the governor to be signed. He's doing a legal review, kind of a mixed bag on whether these are going to move forward or not. I mean, Stephanie Young said she expects this will actually go forward. So we'll see. This could be a kind of non-issue in a week or two. But why it's important, the stakes is because it includes bills like the Museum Authorities Act, which would basically allow the Charles H. Wright Museum, the Detroit Historical Museum, and other cultural institutions to ask voters for a millage that would help them fund their buildings. And we have a lot of deferred maintenance issues at the Wright. They've come to the city and asked for help. The city has a very limited budget for these kinds of things. So it'd be a new way to raise revenue for museums and cultural institutions. Another one, pretty big topic is the opt-out for public transportation. So this basically wouldn't allow cities within Wayne County and Oakland County to opt out of the Public Transit Authority and pay taxes that would fund the RTA, which is in charge of the Q line now, as well as SMART, and is leading some conversations around regional transportation. So that will be very interesting moving forward. One of the issues with our transportation system is it's underfunded. So There's some bills for school safety requirements. Basically, there's some firearms storage codes as well. Bills that would make different changes to improve healthcare for new mothers was a big piece of this as well. Folks might remember the momnibus bills. Momnibus, it's a combination of the word mother and omnibus. It's just kind of like a legislative term. Those actually didn't pass. Those were aimed at trying to give basically reduce racial disparities, I think, in women's healthcare. So this is a different bill, but kind of along the same line, trying to help improve healthcare for new mothers. We know that a lot of Black babies die because their mothers don't get adequate prenatal care and follow-up visits in those really critical early. Another bill would create a Michigan Sentencing Commission, which would analyze data related to incarceration and develop modifications to state sentencing guidelines. Another would help returning citizens obtain an ID card after leaving jail. So anyway, those are a couple. There's a bunch more, but that's why it matters here, because these are all bills that would have an impact on the lives of a lot of folks here in the state.
Yeah, and definitely thanks for sharing more of that. And I still stand on my soapbox. Like, this is why a lot of people check out, and I'm presenting this optimistically because I do believe that, especially right now, the push for a lot of this is, Lord knows, similar to the solar, what's going to happen under the Trump administration, as I don't even know what's going on with federal funding and distributions to predominantly Black cities and what that's going to look like in the Trump administration. I would not assume that it's going to look very abundant and nothing like what was flowing to Detroit when Biden was in office. So moving forward with this now is going to be key of what could be advantageous. How it happens, when it happens, and how it executes still shouldn't be one of those things where how do I want to put this? Where the wrong decision is made in haste, and we have to stand up for that wrong decision, even when we understand that, like, okay, we can change and pivot here, and it can be more empowering to residents. Because that's really all I'm speaking of. Think from the lens of a resident, the average Detroiter. With that being said, y'all already know, public comment, Detroit is different, every Thursday, 8 a.m. Malachi, what you want to tell the people?
So Detroit Next, the show that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, will be dropping in the next week, I believe. So go find that on YouTube. All of our content for the mayoral election, all of our multimedia content will live on our YouTube channel, just bridgedetroit.com. I'm sorry, just Bridge Detroit on YouTube, and you'll find it. Subscribe to that to catch our content when it drops. Also, go to bridgedetroit.com, sign up for the notebook. It's a free newsletter that is kind of the foundation of what we talk about on the show. There's a lot more detail in there and plenty of links to documents and other information if you really want to get in the weeds. But that is a free email subscription service. And everything we do here at Bridge Detroit is free, and it relies on your support, your generous donations, keep this thing moving. So if you want to know how to support me, how to support Bridge Detroit, donate. That's the easiest thing to do. And definitely support Detroit is different, because now this partnership started with public comment has blossomed into a new show with Steven. And so we're doing bigger and better things here in 2025, and we'd like your support for that.
Peace. You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. the live stream. Detroit is different in Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit.